You're listening to Rebel Spirituality with me, Sam Goldfinch. Here's the truth. Wisdom doesn't follow rules. So each week we're going to explore what it means to wake up your way so you can live a more peaceful, creative and inspired life no matter your circumstances. It's time to blaze your unique path to truth. Hey friends, I'm really excited to put this one together because I'm hot off of a coaching call where we were exploring the power of more deeply understanding how we work, more deeply understanding how our experience is created. And what strikes me is there's a question, which is why? Why is it important? Why is it helpful to have a deeper understanding as to the nature of experience? Like, why does that actually help us out? Because ultimately, if it's just some intellectual game, if it's just something we're doing to kind of feed our intellect and just something that we're chewing on in our mind, it's not really getting us anywhere. It's not really helping. But I'm going to suggest that it's not like that at all, actually. I shared on the call that if I had the choice between waking somebody up to understand the nature of experience, to understand how their experience works, or to give them every single piece of kind of information or knowledge that was contained in all of the worlds of coaching and therapy and all of that stuff, I'd give them the understanding. I'd give them that seemingly simple understanding as to how life works. Now, you will have heard me share this many times, and there's many people that share the inside-out understanding, as I like to call it. But essentially, it says that we're always living in the feeling of our own internally generated perceptual reality. We're not living in the feeling of the world out there. We're living in the feeling of the power of thought creating our world from within. Now, that doesn't just mean the thinking that we have in our head, right? It's all the invisible thinking. So some people call that unconscious thinking, this kind of thing. Kind of like to think of it as invisible thinking, the stuff that, we may be in a feeling tone that day, but there's not necessarily any words in our head. Sometimes we just feel like we're in a bit of a funk. Well, that's not giving us information about the world. It's giving us information about our internally generated world. Now, I'm going to suggest that one of the most powerful implications of knowing that is that it keeps us out of trouble. So, what do I mean by that? The first thing that would make sense to anyone logically is that if it looks to us like our experience is coming from out there. So, for example, if someone is convinced that their experience is giving them information about the future, so if it looks like they're feeling the future, we've explored that on the podcast, or if it looks like they're getting information if it looks like they're mind reading, if it looks like they're getting information about what somebody else is thinking about them in the moment, all of that stuff, essentially what it boils down to is in those moments, it looks like there's a world out there that has the power to control how we think and feel. And when that's the case, it's not a crazy next step to think, well, then I need to change the world in order to change how I feel. So we tend to start playing around with the things that we can see. We think we need to change that person's behavior, or we think we need to change our job because if our experience is coming from our circumstances, that's completely logical, right? So we get ourselves into trouble. Now, I don't necessarily mean trouble with the law or anything, although I guess that could happen. But I just mean we just start playing around with the world out there thinking that that's the solution to this problem that we have. And so we play around with the world. But if there's things that we can't change, so for example, if we think that our experience is coming from the job that we're in, and we don't see that it's really coming from thought in that moment, in all its forms, invisible thought, unconscious thought, conscious thought, all of the things that are in the special effects department, sensations, emotions, feelings, if we don't see how our experience is being created in that moment, then we start, as I say, trying to change things out there. And if we feel like we can't, then we feel trapped. And if we feel trapped, we often feel like a victim of the world out there. We feel like that the world has power over me. There's nothing I can do about it. And we have things that we tend to do. For some of us, we drink, or for some of us, all sorts of kinds of behaviors that we might use to try and medicate against that innocent misunderstanding. There's all sorts of things that might occur to us, and we can get ourselves in trouble in that sense. And so I was talking to someone on this coaching call today, and they said to me, and I was walking around today and I was really in a funk and really caught up in my thinking, and then I just kind of heard this voice in my head that said, this is going to pass. This is just something to be curious about. I don't have to add more thinking to what's currently going on right now. And what this person had seen is basically they'd had an insight into how their experience was being created. They'd seen how the power of thought was moving through them, and they realized that if they didn't do anything with it, it would start to shift and change in its own time. Now, there's a metaphor that's often used of the snow globe. And the reason it's so powerful is that it's, if you put a snow globe down, it will settle and the water in the snow globe becomes clear, because that's the nature of the snow globe. And that's what we're like. If we don't get so involved, if we don't embellish or add extra thinking, if we just kind of accept that we are where we are right now. Someone asked me the other day, like, what's the quickest way to get out of a funk? And my response was, don't make it a big deal that you're in one. And in my experience, if we don't make it a big deal that we're in a funk, that will shift through. We have a psychological immune system. But for me, for the longest time, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. I thought my experience was coming from out there. And I felt like I had to get everything in a certain way out there before I could access peace or contentment or whatever it might be. And in a way, it's like every time we go back into that story in our head and start trying to play around with it, or we go out into the world and we try and tinker around with or completely change our circumstances to impact how we feel, it's a bit like grabbing the snow globe and you just keep shaking it. And we don't have that opportunity to orient back towards clarity. So this isn't to say that there isn't times in life to change our life circumstances. It's that it's not time for a new job or whatever it might be. But in my experience, the knowing and the wisdom that moves through us when we're in a calmer, more settled space is much more helpful, is much more aligned with what's best for us, effectively. And so another way that this keeps us out of trouble is, yes, there may be something that we want to change, but is the opportune moment when we're kind of really stirred up, when the snow globe's really going crazy, or is it about taking that pause? And, it's kind of about knowing that it's safe to take that pause. Most people don't realize that their system is trying to orient them back towards clarity all the time, like without us doing anything. And that's an understanding thing, because the moment we realize that our experience isn't coming from out there, another way of putting that is that we're not living in the feeling of the world, that we're truly just living in the feeling of our own internally generated reality, then a lot of the things that we've been up to, it doesn't make sense to kind of hold on to them. Like if we realize that there's a thought that we've been holding on to, something about not being good enough or not being enough, or some of the very common things that I hear, if we realize that holding on to that thought hurts us and it doesn't feel good, it hurts us in the sense that it just doesn't feel nice in the system. Well, we can realize, I don't have to hold on to that. And something new will be created. And I think for a lot of us, we come to realize that many of the kind of long-term funks that we might have been in or whatever it might be, it's because we've been holding on to thought and thinking it's true. We've been believing in a story or whatever it might be. Well, just being able to stop holding on is very helpful. And to me, that comes from more and more insights into the nature of how we work, basically, how our experience works. So, yeah, we keep ourselves out of trouble. I think there's many other reflections we could have on this, and I'm sure I will record many more going forwards, but I just wanted to put this together, because it was front of my mind, and, it was a very powerful call, and I just wanted to come and kind of put this out there in the hope that some of you may hear something more deeply, or hear something new in this, and, yeah, all that good stuff. All right, team. I hope you have an amazing day. Thanks for being here with me. I'll see you soon.